Welcome to the event. It's our 9th anniversary, as Ron indicated in his opening comments. Our featured speaker today has a 40-plus year career as a business development trainer and coach, a strategic planner, a transformational speaker, a conflict manager, and he also has done other things. He's had heavy involvement with Toastmasters over the years and many other organizations. He's going to be presenting Making Conflict Productive. Would you please give a very warm welcome to Frank DeDominicis.
Thank you. All right, everyone, hold on tight. I'm going to share some good ideas with you. I'm going to share a screen and pull up my slides. And after I share with you the information, we'll pause the slideshow and have a little bit of time for Q&A. And then I'll come back at the end to let you know what I'm doing in the future with various trainings and whatnot. So without further ado, here we go. I want to say that what motivated me to focus on productive conflict was the fact that it seems like the pressure gets ratcheted up every year lately to where the mental health of the world is really stressed out. There's just so much change going on. So I wanted to share some ideas on how we could do three things. One, solve simple disagreements with each other quickly. So I have a simple method for doing that. Secondly, I want to address the issue of bullyism and give you some ideas if you're in a situation where you need to confront, to have a positive conscious confrontation with the bully, how to prepare for that. I am one of the vintage DISC trainers from over 40 years ago. I've worked with all phases of it. I actually helped the R&D department at Wiley Publishing to test new instruments. There's a brand new one called Productive Conflict that's based on DISC research around the destructive behaviors of the DISC. So we'll wind up with that, and then we'll pause for Q&A. First of all, what does destructive conflict look like? It looks like disrespect. It looks like an intention to hurt the other person. What does productive conflict look like? It looks like a mutual interest in ending this thing and an ability to have emotional intelligence, to be emotionally agile and put feelings aside for the moment in order to solve the mutually agreed upon problem. Last year, close to 50 million workers in the West said they were bullied at work. This bears it out. Half of the people really aren't aware of it, and the other half are. In fact, some of them are actually bullies. We bully in meetings. It's easy to flame and run, right? Who has not gotten an insulting or a side type of email from someone, or a message, I should say. Actually, email is not used for bullying much at all. Who wants to have a permanent document of a rant or a temper tantrum or an insult? Bosses, 65% of them are responsible for the bullying. Co-workers, 21%. And from the bottom up, line workers harassing their supervisors or managers, 14%. Once again, we'll cover these 3 points, so no need to take notes. I'll give you these slides at the end, and I have a lovely little research gift that's based on what I'll be sharing with you to give to you as well at the end. Here's what we're worried about. We're worried about threats to democracy, cost of living, jobs, et cetera, and we're all cranked up over this. And fortunately, coronavirus is down at the bottom. It looks like we're not where we were 2.5 years ago, panicked despite losing millions of people. It looks like we're making a pathway with that. Pennhurst State School and Hospital in Pennsylvania. I worked there. In the 70s, I was a psychiatric aide, and I was surprised when I saw an abuse case. I saw an elder nurse viciously beat a disabled patient, and I reported it. I did the right thing, but I was surprised on my exit interview to find that the assailant, the offender, was simply moved to another ward. That's how they handle that type of conflict back in the day, back in the 70s. Here we have the modern LED battling out with the tungsten bulb, fighting. Conflictus, the word conflict, calm together, and flagera, to strike. So when I think of striking or mixing things together, I think of how I mix ingredients for a cake, the butter, sugar, flour, etc. And I mix those. So think of conflict as that. I kind of take the emotions out, my own reactive emotions, and I look at the different values and opinions and biases involved in the conflict so I can address the reasoning of the other person. So if we learn to do that, somehow remove the emotions and just look at the facts, maybe we can make a nice cake out of conflict. Some relationships actually improve by fighting through conflicts without fighting the person. As Gandhi said, fight the problem, not the person. Why do we fight? We fight for a lot of reasons, and perhaps you could add some reasons to this list that we have here. It's important to learn problem-solving skills because things blow up, things change. Significant emotional events shift attitudes, behavior, values. In fact, you probably noticed in society, the way we relate to each other has changed since day one of the pandemic. So now a very, very simple method for how to solve conflicts, because what I've found is when people are arguing, sometimes their emotions speak for them and they're describing symptoms, and perhaps one of the two parties is describing the root problem. Maybe they're both describing symptoms. The point is, you should have some discussion to define exactly what the problem is specifically in words, in writing. So you're working on the same problem and not sending two complaints across to each other. Who has the problem? Who owns it? If you're upset, if you're the one who brought it to the table, then you own the problem. Do something about it. Forgive it, let it go, or work it out. The next thing to do is brainstorm on as many outcomes, good outcomes as possible. And here, this is a wild brainstorming session. It doesn't have to be reasonable because a wild idea can mind map out to a practical idea. And then take action. We're usually lax to do this because conflict is emotionally messy and who wants to deal with it? Yet we must. But put it on the calendar and take the first baby step. And then ask, is it resolved? If it's not, go back to your list and work the next ideal outcome on the list. There you have it, a simple way to walk through problem solving. Now, time to fight the good fight. Bullies. I'm going to reference throughout this presentation DISC. I understand many of you are familiar with DISC. It's quite the deep piece of research. It's the most trusted such behavioral instrument in the education, counseling, and training field, with over 70 million profiles and 1 million more each year. So its accuracy is very, very high. In other words, most people will agree with 80 to 85% of what's in the report itself. Here are some of the qualities, some of the traits of these general styles. We'll get more into detail about their destructive behavior later. So how do they bully? Well, the assertive aggressive ones, they just roll right over you. They become even more aggressive. The I's, they're all about feelings. They're the empaths. So they'll use, if they're abusing, they'll use public embarrassment, shame, guilt. S's, their highest value is loyalty. So the best way for them to say no to a relationship with you is to become disloyal and to engage in silent sabotage, maybe not even do the work. And then C's, the compliant or conscientious types, they're very observant. So they know a lot about you. They're very spatially aware. So they'll have specific points that they know about you intuitively that they can use to cut you, to hurt you, to slander you, maybe even create a hate committee. First of all, we don't want to enter into a conscious conflict with this mindset. There are people who believe in might makes right, and you'll never win with them. Just walk away. There's no sense in even approaching solving a problem. The first thing to do when planning a conscious confrontation is to get your support team together, because the news is you might not win. You might actually get beat up. So make sure you have your support team in place so you can role play some what if scenarios beforehand. And if the risk is low enough and the reward is high enough, do consider entering into a conflict with that persistent bully. It's most important before you go to that conflict to calm yourself down. I don't know how many of you practice meditation or prayer or quiet time, but it is possible to get to silence and quiet self-talk. And it's important to do that just to quiet the emotions and reflect on the attitude and values of the other so that you can respond properly to their reasoning. Everyone gets bullied online, everyone. In fact, I'll reference a study by the Wheeling Group. You'll see this in the handout I'll give you at the end. In 2006, they collected a group of political rightists and political leftists in separate rooms, not the same room, although that would have made an interesting study. But they asked the groups individually to do a debate exercise to explain why the other party was right. I know this is hard to do, but if you've studied debate, this helps you to understand the reasoning or develop some insights into the reasoning of your opponent. When this exercise was done, the frontal lobes lit up, the logic, reasoning portion of our brain. And then a second experiment. They were asked to explain why the other party was wrong. And my, guess what happened? The logical part of our brain was a little bit calmer, and the part of the brain that registers emotions lit up the emotion, the area that registers when we feel disgust. And coincidentally, at the same time, the interferon dispensers lit up too, the pleasure centers. So in kind of a morbid way, we actually enjoy beating someone up in our mind. We probably would be embarrassed to admit that, but anger does give people a sense of power. So perhaps we've been rehearsing an old grudge, and that's part of the wiring. Hopefully we can change that wiring through what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, which does work very powerfully. So who gets bullied? Young people get bullied, old people get bullied through rumors, discrediting statements, insults, racist comments, homophobic, maybe insults to your religion, various levels of threats, punishing, hacking your machine, impersonations with deep fakes, or always being there, always nagging. The important thing to do is to prepare. And I help people to prepare in the full productive conflict training to wash out problems, to get them off the list. Because if you've ever studied martial arts, you know that when you have trained so much that you have superior strength, agility, speed, you're prepared, you enter that ring with fire in your eyes. And that's intimidating to the bully. So the most important thing is to be prepared for the conflict. This symbol, this gesture means stop violence, prevent violence. So the attitude is not to throw gas on the fire or to overwhelm your opponent, but just to stop them, just to match their level of aggression and push. So you can learn how to drop that file of old grudges and resentments and difficult relationships so it doesn't take up all that parking space in your brain, so you can have more room and more emotional dollars available. There is a way to do that with any type of problem. This is important. If you're in conflict with someone, think about reputational losses. If you're being attacked by someone else and they're acting crazy, you don't have to respond impulsively, instinctually. You want people to say, well, at least Frank was conciliatory. He asked intelligent questions. He pointed out flaws in the other person's argument, but was not attacking the other person. We all have destructive behavior capacity, especially if we're pushed too far. Here are 4 of them that are common in the office. Gossiping is insidious because if someone's new to the organization or they're insecure in their position at the organization, they may look up to the gossiper as someone who's in on things, who knows what's happening behind the scenes, and may give you more credibility than you deserve, and they'll expand the gossip as well. Sarcasm is oblique communication. You really can't tell if it's meant to be an insult or not. So the sarcastic person can get off the hook by saying, "Oh, Frank, just relax. I was only joking." But somehow still they get the dig in. Stonewalling. This is when the other person's behavior is so objectionable that you don't even want to talk to them. There's no communication at all. An exaggeration could be said to be making the situation sound as painful and difficult as it is in the way you feel about it. And it's very helpful because by exaggeration, you make your case all that much more defensible and you make the other person's behavior seem that much more awful. Proximity bias. This has happened intensely since the COVID, since the hybrid models. Because if you're sitting next to someone and talking to them, naturally you're going to be buddies. But if you're separate in the same building or even in hybrid, you're not going to have that tactile contact. You're not going to have the warmth, affection, and goofing around at the office. And there will naturally be some distance. So what is conflict? Let's look at conflict in the context of DISC. It is a big drag on organizations. 70% of managers say it impacts their efficiency. They spend 17 hours a month dealing with interpersonal conflict, and 2 out of 5 quits are due to interpersonal conflicts. The drains, the problems are huge. Territorialism, gossip, resistant change, false consensus, withholding information, pocket vetoes. That's where you hold out to the end to push your no vote, push the argument over the line. Clicks, hiding mistakes, cynicism. There's missed opportunities as well. The opportunity costs are taking risks, giving emotional support, seeking out feedback, volunteering feedback, spearheading change, reaching out to new co-workers, sacrificing for the team, and complimenting on a good job. So when conflict comes to me, I reach for my 4 Ds. I ask, is it something I could just dump? Is it even necessary for me to give my attention to it? If no, then is it something I can delegate? Can I give it to my friend, coworker, attorney? Or is it something I must do that's not imperative, but is important? If so, then I schedule it for later so it doesn't interfere with my flow now. And if it's imperative, if I must do it, then I do. I put it on the calendar and I take action. So that's dump, delegate, delay, and do. People give us signals. Sometimes we don't see them. We don't interpret them correctly. Sometimes we absolutely don't read facial expressions well. And sometimes we just don't pick up on the nuances of behavior that you will learn if you've taken the DISC profile. You probably have already learned a lot about people reading. I'm going to blend some concepts. I'm going to blend some of the core DISC research, particularly around productive conflict, with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the nonstop cause and effect cycle of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It involves being aware, being self-aware of our own self-talk, of our own destructive, impulsive reaction to other people, catching that thought, reframing it, and then choosing a more productive response. Easy to say, but it is hard to do. It does take time and practice to do it. So dominants are comfortable with power. Influencers are natural empaths. Steady people like peace and harmony. And the conscientious ones like to keep track of details. They're very low verbal, but they're very observant as well. The destructive behaviors are these. If a dominant becomes pushed, they become even more aggressive and they may misuse power. The I's, as I said before, are all about feelings and emotions. So if they hate you, they'll indulge in gossip, slander, anything to make you feel bad. And then the S's, because they appreciate peace and quiet and harmony, their destructive tendency is just to withdraw, to be passive aggressive, just like the C as well. The C, if they're offended, they'll just withdraw, and they may actually make a hate committee, start a gossip clique against you. But how do we change? How do we stretch ourselves? That's an important piece of the training that I do. In the productive conflict training, we actually we measure how much resistance we have to positive change. For example, if you're a high S, you like harmony, so it might not feel comfortable for you to deliver critical feedback to a C. It may feel impolite or rude, at the very least uncomfortable. And the self-talk is, people are going to think I'm being a jerk if I'm giving corrective feedback. If the S needs to share a good idea, they might be shy. They might not bring it to the table when they should be saying this should be on the agenda, or we should include this in the next meeting. Because they're thinking, oh gosh, if I keep pushing my point of view, people are going to get angry. And if they're asked to rally the troops, that's just not their style. They don't want to get up on stage with a microphone with passion and emotion and rally the troops. That's very uncomfortable. They feel like they're acting. They feel like they're going to come across as self-absorbed. The C's are very logical. They have a unique quality that's different than the other three quadrant areas, in that they get disgusted with what they perceive as lack of intelligence from the others. Because they're so observant, they've taken in a lot of information about the area around them and about you. Their dignity is very important. They're very easily insulted if you insult their intelligence, so be careful about how you deliver feedback to them. And if they need to listen to someone else giving them criticism, that's very difficult for them. They don't want to be questioned, and they don't want someone to question their logic because they know what's right. They've done their homework. If they're asked to rally the troops, they necessarily have to cross over the dominant area to become a little bit more assertive, aggressive in order to do that. That's highly uncomfortable for them to make that big stretch. So they might not have the courage to do that. It may be uncomfortable, so they'll take a half measure and just send an email, perhaps, because they're afraid their credibility might fail. So now we have an inefficient team. We've got two people in a team working together, and things are just not going to work out because of these inhibitions. So how do you get to be what I call a social chameleon? How, no matter where your plotting point lands, how do you learn to act differently, to adapt to others? How do you learn to be a social chameleon? What do you think? I'm going to stop now and stop the slideshow and take some questions from you.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Frank, and we'll get to the questions and answers, but I just want to mention that whenever we have sufficient people in the Zoom to make it in more than one screen, it's actually best if we use the digital raise hand function rather than our physical hand, because I might miss you if you're on a different screen than what I'm looking at. So the digital raise hand function is in the reactions area in the lower navigation area, and when you click on that reactions, it creates a pop-up menu. Raise hand is very clearly marked there. So who would like to either make a comment or raise their hand? And oh, I see Khalil. Go ahead, Khalil.
Hi, thank you, Randy. Hi, Frank. Thank you so much. It's a great presentation. Some old things and some new things always. Thank you so much. So I've been kind of mulling around, like, a thing called positive aggression. Like it's a I think it's like a long lost art, because these were like the bosses of yesteryear that would be like, hey, you got to get this done, and they would rally people by being hard on them. And I found in my experience, I'm a union worker. I've been working with the same company for 18 years. There's different management styles where learning how to interpret that aggression and utilizing it when it's not personal. How can you talk to positive aggression or positive aggressive assertiveness? I don't know. That's not a term, but you know what I'm saying. So please, thank you.
Do you want me to address it in terms of the workplace or in terms of personal relationships in general?
Well, both, because I mean, you're a person in the workplace, and if you're working for under someone or with someone, whether it's a strategic partner or a joint venture partner, or you're an employee, or you're the boss working with your employee or whatever. I mean, there's different dynamics. So, I know there's a lot to unpack. I always do that, but I love what you're sharing, and whatever you can share is great.
Okay, I'll give a short answer to the workplace piece and then a little bit more on interpersonal. In the workplace, and it's hard to be exact on this without knowing a specific culture, but what I would do if I was the recipient of this type of workplace verbal delivery aggression is communicate with the speaker and say, I appreciate what the message you're giving me, but the delivery is a little off-putting, and you can be a little gentle with me. I'm a human. I would try to humanize the relationship. I would take advantage of that opportunity to remove that tension, that friction, just because of the delivery of the command. Now, in personal, if you're receiving this kind of aggressive behavior from other people, the most important thing you can do is think like a hostage negotiator, because in effect, the other person who's creating an emotional storm for you is holding your peace of mind hostage. And that requires a shift in dynamics. It requires not being impulsive, but just as if you were, let's say you're the hostage negotiator talking to the bank robber who's inside the bank, and the bank robber is insulted or making outrageous commands. You don't want to respond to that aggression with more aggression. You want to, as much as possible, be as sincere as you can with that person and let them know what your limitations are. If I would say, if I was in a role play and someone's being aggressive towards me, I would say, this doesn't really make me feel comfortable with you. It makes me feel like our friendship's degrading. The way you're talking to me affects the way we work together. I've had this with a client I took on 5 years ago, and we had been working for a few months, and then at one point he just blew up and thought it was okay to have a temper tantrum with me. And I thought, well, on one hand, I'm complimenting because maybe he's reacting like I'm his sibling. It's okay to just let it out. But I stopped him and I said, you know what, from now on, we're going to be conscious of every word that we use, and we're going to talk to each other with respect, even if we're sharing differences. So once again, to summarize on that, in order to deal with that type of aggressive delivery, I do encourage research in how the top hostage negotiators work, because that involves using questions and listening and asking for concessions from the other person. It's not a lot to ask from someone else to just, please, can you be a little bit more gentle in giving me the evaluation? For those of you who've been in Toastmasters, the better half of that is evaluation, and you do learn how to speak to someone critically, to give them critical evaluation in a way that they can hear it. So I hope that's helpful for you in both the workplace and in general.
Yes, thank you so much. And is it okay to use the disc like a record? Wiki, you go around the disc and be all those parts. Is that okay?
What do you mean?
Well, if you're multifaceted, like knowing that sometimes you could be an S, you could be a C, you could be a D, and I, we all have different parts to us, and recognizing that helps us recognize that in others. Would you say that's a process?
Yeah, I understand you. First, let me say this: DISC is not about types, it's about styles. It's not a clinical instrument, it's not predictive. I know people use it for pre-screening, but the publisher, the researchers say don't use that. It's not predictable. You could look like anything based on the environment you're in and the relationship. So that's one thing I would say. And in terms of your first question, I would say yes, it's very good to practice being a chameleon, to learn these behaviors, because we're different. We're totally different now, today in this meeting, than we would be in the evening with our lover, our partner. So try not to label people. I really don't like when I hear people say I'm a 9, I'm a blue, I'm a 10, I'm a D. It's just general tendencies. And based, as I said before, based on the environment, we behave differently. So yes, do learn to be, if you need to be forceful, learn when that is appropriate. Sometimes a high D appreciates a 2x4 upside the head because they're very aggressive and fast, and they sometimes appreciate a confrontation that slows them down or brings them to reality. In the eyes, if you recognize their needs, they focus primarily on the relationship before the content of the communication. So if you want to adapt to that person, know that they want an empathetic connection. They want some sort of personal connection. Even going into a conflict with a high I, you could make that connection by saying, I understand we're going into a fight, but Frank, we've been working together for years, or we've known each other for some, we like the same baseball team, anything to make a personal connection. And then you can move on to the conflict. This S's, you want to be peaceful with them. You don't want to use language like dynamic, sudden change. You want to take them logically from A, B, C, and carefully explain things. And the C's, they're a little bit harder to read because they're the ones who are the quietest and they have a lot of information. So you want to use questions with them and in a respectful tone so they can explain the reasons. Why are you so pissed at me? What did I do wrong? Use negative assertion with them in order for them to disclose. When they disclose, that gives them a chance to let out their anger. And remember what I said earlier, anger biochemically feels like a sense of power. And once someone vents, just like a volcano, they're not going to return to that same degree of that same temperature of hostility. Is that helpful to you?
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, do be a chameleon.
Well, thank you for your questions, Khalil, and also for your wonderful responses, Frank. Next, I see Tracy Parsons has a question or comment. Go ahead, Tracy.
I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions for when there is a conflict and you've been trying to reach out to the person to resolve the conflict, but they are not responding, period. Like there's no dialogue. And you're really wanting to make some headway with it, but you can't because they're not willing to engage. Then what?
And let me see if I understand your quandary. You want to somehow open up that communication. Is that right?
Yes.
Well, fortunately, I have the same problem with someone with a relation. And I would say the best way to open up that communication if you're being stonewalled is to find a mutual ally, someone who's respected by that other person, and ask them for advice. What is it I can do just to open the door? Is it possible? And get their advice, but it has to be someone that the other person respects.
Yeah, this is a business situation, so I don't know anybody that they would know, that we would know in common. It's a client, and I'm just like stymied as to what it feels very junior high right now.
I understand. Have you asked them why they're
So
quiet?
I was just hoping that maybe you might have some insight. Yeah.
Have you asked them why they're stonewalling?
I haven't directly asked them why they're quiet. Well, I know why. I know why. Because they misunderstood something that was said. And when I clarified, I didn't like the clarification. And they have just stopped talking. And this was it was a new working relationship, but it was to be an ongoing working relationship. I have things to give him, but I don't know what to do with him anymore because he's not talking to me. So I'm just sort of like, I'm at a loss. I don't really know what to do at this point. I think he's upset, and I think he feels like I might have been misleading him, but really he just read into it what he wanted to hear. and now he's just not talking.
Okay, I'll do the best I can with
Okay.
this. This is a tough one.
To-
But we can talk one-on-one later if you want deeper insight on this, but I would knowing what I know now, I would ask you, is it necessary to continue this relationship?
Well, from a business standpoint, it would be nice if I could repair this.
Okay. Then if I was the hostage negotiator and my peace of mind is being taken by this stonewalling, I would ask the other person, perhaps probably in writing naturally, a respectful note, I would ask the reason for the silence that and stress the positive aspects, the benefits of the relationship, and state an honest curiosity that you don't know why there's a wall. And could you please explain? And I really think that's the best you can do. Now you're going to get a response to that that's either positive or negative. If it's positive, if they're willing to just at least tell you what the problem is, you're at a starting place where you could work through that problem solving process. However, if the behavior is, as you say, junior, if the behavior is destructive or immature, I think you need a third party in the company. You need a mediator who knows both of you to try to bridge that, because you really don't have a lot to work with if people are stonewalling, or if they respond to honest question about how to move forward with more insult. That could be that person, maybe they have a bit of that might makes right, that I'm feeling good, I'm feeling superior because my anger makes me feel powerful, so I'm not going to respond, or I'm going to respond with more insult. You do need a third party, you do need a mediator in that case.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but that's the reality. And like I said,
Yeah.
anyone here can connect with me one-on-one later if you want to have a few minutes about something more sensitive. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'd like to hear some takeaways. I'm open to questions, but what has been good about this for you? What have been the benefits?
We've actually got 4 people lined up with their hands up.
Okay.
We've got Suzanne. Have you got some question or comment for Frank?
It's interesting listening to you. And one of the things that humankind have sort of lost, I think, is that empathetic perception of what people truly mean when they're having a conversation with you and what they're picking up. Now, if we're talking about young people coming into the workforce and not fully understanding how the dynamics of a workplace work, how relationships work, sometimes it's just a matter of saying, in my opinion, having worked and been in charge of many various personalities in my time, sometimes it's just a matter of I can feel something's bothering you. When you're ready, come and talk to me. Like, just open it up, and now it's in their court to actually try to resolve the situation. If they don't, then you go the next step. But they have to feel that you're open to that conversation. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a colleague or a business client or a friend or the dog next door. The same thing applies, is you have to let them know that you're open to that conversation. If you feel shut off in your body language, in your presence, they're not going to come to you for anything. If you're guarded, especially if it's a younger person learning the ways of the world and understanding that we've literally been isolated from human contact for quite some time. And so that immaturity in regards to social relationships or business relationships for sure could definitely just be an issue of not really knowing how to cope with whatever it is that's going on. Now, might be just blowing it out my ears. I'm an old lady and I say it how I see it. And I've worked with so many diverse people over the years. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it's like there's a chemistry between people it's like oil and vinegar. No matter how much you mediate it, no matter how much you try to be positive about it and include and whatever, it's that oil and vinegar, and it's not going to work no matter how hard you try to make it work. Sometimes it's just not a fit. And I think sometimes we, being givers, me personally, I like to always give chances. But sometimes if it's affecting your work, or if it's affecting your own mindset, then you have to look at how that works. Already we're in a situation in the world where our mindset's always a little bit on the edge. We're never sure. Our incomes have changed, our lives have changed, our workplaces have changed. I'm back working at home. I hate it. My mindset sucks right now. I'm just putting it out there. But having worked with so many young people that are trying their best, but just not quite there, a lot of it is just emotional immaturity and not having the experience of working with multiple different personalities. And if you're working in the office with a strong personality, sometimes it's really hard to bite your tongue. Sometimes it's really hard not to show that outwardly pissed offedness. It's really, I know that's not a word, but it's really true. Sometimes you go about things and somebody comes in and they feel like they're bigger and better and brighter and shinier, and they kind of throw vinegar into the milk a little bit. And for a young person that doesn't know how to even old people don't know how to navigate that sometimes. As an old person to navigate it, for me now, it's a matter of depending on sort of what I feel the experience of that person in that work situation is. For me, if that conversation doesn't work, and it only works within the conversation, if you understand what I mean by that, it's not the right place. Now, whoever has seniority or whoever has more, whatever, maybe you just make that suggestion. Maybe this isn't the right place. Maybe this is the wrong situation for you. You know, we're here, we want to work together, but something's not working right. So you got to throw it back in their court. You got to offer it. You got to open up. But if they're not ready to open the door and walk through it, then they got to walk out it.
You're right. Cooperation is a two-way street, and sometimes there are irreconcilable differences because of the rigidity of some styles.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I agree with you. We have another hand up. Who else?
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you for Sheila Buswell. Go ahead.
That was a really good, very good presentation, and I believe conflict does come to resolutions. Like, I was in the military, there's a lot of people who brush their teeth now and don't smell bad because of conflict. But at the end of the day, I aspire to treat people with dignity and respect, but I don't behave my best when I'm low on sleep and I'm hungry. And I wanted to know if you have any way of saying, okay, I'm fine of talking about this, but not now. Like, I'm not at my best right now. So like, I accept that you have a problem, but let's talk about it at this time in this place. Like, not saying, how do I put this? Like Suzanne was saying, I'm like acknowledging that there's a problem and we need to discuss it, just not now. Like, it's better for everybody because I'm liable to throw a tantrum and I'm middle-aged. So that's not as cute as I was when I was 5.
Oh, goodness. Coincidentally, I had that experience just a few nights ago when a client called me at midnight, and I picked up because I thought, my goodness, it must be an emergency. It was not an emergency. And I was wiped out. I had a nonstop day, and I just got angry. And I realized I was expressing that anger. So I put the brakes on. I said, look, I'm tired and cranky, and this can wait till next week. And here's my calendar. And they didn't appreciate that. But I realized how inappropriate that was. I have to set boundaries. So there's nothing wrong with saying, let's calm down and talk about this later. I think as Suzanne was mentioning too, feelings count. Our feelings, not just the aggressor, but our feelings count. If we're not in a good shape in terms of self-care and our body battery, it's perfectly okay in my world to say, I understand we have a conflict. Let's pause now and come back to this at another time. Just that time factor sometimes gives people time to think about how to communicate a little bit more respectfully. Is that helpful?
Yes.
And you don't have to think about being cute when you were young. We're always cute. My mom was 102 when she left, and she was cute as could be.
Well, thanks, Sheila, for your question, and Frank for your response. Sim, you have a question or comment, or both?
I have both. Yeah, thank you so much, Frank. This was a great presentation. And my takeaway is that this is a real situation. Like, this is really good stuff, because I felt like you're talking about me, by the way. So I had both a gossiper and if somebody gossiped about me. I was in a job, I was a new guy, so new to Canada, and slandered me to the boss and was trying to push me down. And my mom was unwell. I was very stressed out by the situation of my family. And then my boss, I had a meeting on one-on-one and told me that I'm not doing well and that kind of thing, blah, blah, blah. And then I thought, I know who told you exactly what you said, because I know that side, but that's not true. And then there was another guy who was stonewalling and was kind of narcissistic and didn't want to talk to me. And you know how people can, as Suzanne said, want to kind of be in a place of a boss, even if they're not, and that they want to be very important. So I thought, if I really want to submit to these people and be a chameleon, I'm going to lose my life here. Like, they will kind of behind me, and like, I'm not going to make it any step further. You know what I mean? So then I said, would it be wrong if I stand up for myself and say, this is not right, this is not true, this is not, like, it's not fair, you know what I mean? And then kind of talk to the boss about it. Because I had a meeting with the boss and said, I appreciate what you told me, and we don't want this bullying here. We don't want anybody to kind of say bad things against the other person. So Frank, will you say it's wrong to stand up for yourself? Because if you keep submitting, people will walk on your back and crash your whatever.
Well, of course, stand up for yourself. However, I would caution you about using the word fair, because when people fight, they always think the other party is unfair.
Right.
Fair really doesn't exist. And the other thing is, when there's a conflict like this between two people, it's not just the perpetrator and the victim that's affected, it's the onlookers. It's the actual culture being affected. So this is an appropriate time to bring that impact, that negative impact on the culture upstairs and get support, so that the values that the organization or the team want to consistently hold are upheld. Oftentimes that's not stated up front, but I've been in organizations where the values are stated right up front. I was in a sales organization that said our main values are loyalty, dedication, and honesty. And boy, that made everything else flow so smoothly. So I would encourage whoever your supervisor, whoever your boss is, to clarify what type of culture they want, what the values are that describe that culture, and ask everyone to sign on to agreement with those values, that we will talk respectfully, that if we have an impossible situation like stonewalling, that we'll take it upstairs and ask for mediation or ask for feedback on approach. You don't have to live with that, really. I know it's easier done in personal life than work. Sometimes I know in my past work history, I've taken it on the chin because I just didn't want to waste the energy on the boss's clock to respond to an insult or a false accusation. The other thing is, the longer gossip and triangulation ensue, the more it becomes believable. Remember what Edward Bernays said, the cousin to Freud, the father of public relations. He said, if you repeat a lie long enough or loud enough, the people will believe it. Hitler bought his book, Propaganda. So it's important to nip these things in the bud before it starts contaminating the entire culture.
Well, thank you for your question, Sim, and your response, Frank. I have a hard stop at about well, about 2 minutes from now because I have another commitment to get to, and when I stop, then it stops for everybody. So we'll take one more with Professor Dr. Latif Bouya. Have you got a question or comment?
Hi, dear friend, that I like to appreciate you that for your excellent presentation with excellent graphic presentation. What I see that the conflict making to production, positive production, why not that positive competitiveness could help this to make equal to conflict into production. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Randy, could I close now with what's coming up next on the calendar?
Yes, and I'll just also say we have a certificate of appreciation for you. I've got it doubled up in the background there. And of course, your time is worth far more than what this might represent. But
Wow.
I'll get the physical copy to you if you have a way to provide, or if you can provide me with a place to send it.
I have 3 goodies for you that will get to you if Randy has your email. I have a free mini disc infographic that'll show you where your plotting point is today. I'll send that to you if you provide Randy your email. I also have a PDF that has the research behind what I talked about today, particularly about brain chemistry and behavior. And I also will provide the slides to you too. So I'll give all those things to you. So without further ado, I'll let you know about my next event that's coming up right now. On October 20th, I offer a 3-hour comprehensive training on conflict resolution based on the DISC Productive Conflict Tool. This is what it looks like. It gives you an opportunity on a platform called Catalyst to look at your style, your major strengths and weaknesses. There's actually a podcast designed just for you. The really big deal here is that you can team map, you can one-to-one map with people, or you can create a disc map with someone who's not even there if you can describe them. This is very helpful if you're involved in sales or in counseling. And also if you've taken the other disc applications, leadership, emotional intelligence, management, etc., all of those are accessible online. So anyone who's ever taken these profiles can do a map with you. You can team map as together, or you can pull me in if you want me to help moderate that. You'll learn about your podcast, your interaction with others, the environment, how you communicate, and how much you deviate from the traditional style. You'll be able to compare with individuals or a group of others, and an unlimited number of comparisons for an unlimited number of time. This is me up here in the eye, and there's my friend Lucy. We make a really good work team. I provide the drive and enthusiasm, and Lucy keeps me on track. We get to share our categories, our relationships, how to persuade each other, how to give and receive feedback, most importantly, how to manage tension, and how to actually collaborate on real time on a project. The website gives you access in depth to all the profiles, all 12 of them on the pie, and helps you to become a chameleon, a social chameleon.